Thank you very much, everybody, for joining our call today. It's a great pleasure to give you some introduction and guidance on Cynata Therapeutics. We are a company, as Steph indicated, developing a next generation stem cell technology. And the use of stem cells in medicine is one of the most exciting approaches in medical science today, where finally we have been able to understand, to a large extent, how the body undertakes its own repair and recovery processes. And we can now use that information to develop very, very specific and highly effective cell therapy products. These are living drugs, as opposed to the typical drugs that we are all familiar with. These living drugs are based around stem cells, and of most interest is a particular type of stem cell called a mesenchymal stem cell, or MSC for short. So let me move into the presentation and inform you on some of the key highlights of the company of the past 12 months. Developing our MSC-based stem cell medicine, we have now commenced an advanced clinical trial in a very, very large commercial opportunity in osteoarthritis. This is a phase 3 clinical study that is funded by the Australian government. So outstanding leverage for our shareholders having the government support this particular trial. We have commenced a phase 2 trial in COVID-19 here in Australia. And because of the low numbers of COVID patients here, we've actually recently expanded this trial to include similarly affected patients, but from conditions like influenza, for example. So this will ensure that despite low numbers of COVID patients in Australia, we will be able to recruit this trial fairly quickly, particularly as we move into the winter colds and flu season. Last year, we were honoured by the publication of our data from a clinical trial in graft versus host disease in Nature Medicine magazine. Nature Medicine is the most prestigious medical journal in the world, and Cynata's technology was featured on the front cover of that magazine. This confirms Cynata's leadership position worldwide in the development of this particular type of stem cell-based medicine, and was, as I mentioned, a great honour for the company. As we move forward in some of our new clinical studies, we have recently entered into an agreement with a company here in Australia called TechCyte, which has developed a very interesting wound dressing technology that enables the application of our cells, our stem cell-based medicine, to chronic wounds in a condition called diabetic foot ulcer. As a consequence of a capital raising that we undertook around the Christmas period this year, the company is now very well funded for expanding our pipeline and our clinical activity in the United States. Our regulatory activity in the United States. And on our business strategy, we are actively pursuing discussions with potential partners and strategic parties. Cynata has a clear business strategy to partner its technology with large pharmaceutical companies around the world who look to small companies like Cynata to be an innovation powerhouse. And we've already been able to achieve one such transaction in a deal that we've undertaken with Fujifilm of Japan in a worldwide license for our first product in graft versus host disease. A quick few words about the company's technology. It originated at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the United States. This university is the leading center worldwide for the development of stem cell-based medicines and is an acknowledged expert in the therapeutic application of stem cells. The core technology addresses an existing shortcoming in the manufacture of these very, very exciting medical products. The challenge that we face with stem cell-based medicines is in manufacturing them at commercial scale, and Cynata's technology addresses this. We've completed our first commercial transaction with Fujifilm with a license for our graft versus host disease product. And the very, very compelling results in the graft versus host disease clinical study placed the company in an outstanding position to accelerate clinical development in other areas as well. Our share price at the moment is relatively low, offering outstanding buying opportunities for the company. Last year, in 2019, the company received a takeover bid at $2 per share. And now we're trading at 60 cents. And fundamentally, the company is much stronger than it was a year and a half ago. We're very well financed with a strong balance sheet to continue to develop and add value to our technology. And this is underscored by the very, very important top shareholder, Bioscience Managers, a well-respected healthcare investment fund that participated in our capital raising earlier this year. Through Fidelity, just under 10%, one of the leading institutional investors worldwide, and our strategic partner, Fujifilm, was just under 8%, just under 6%. MSCs are the most exciting stem cell-based medicine worldwide. And this is reinforced with this slide here, which shows that there are more than 1,200 clinical trials underway around the world using MSCs. And as those trials continue to develop, the need for more product will become more and more stronger. And our technology provides a manufacturing solution to meet the enormous demand for these products as these trials continue to progress. A very brief summary of our technology and how Cynata has become a leader in this space. The existing or conventional method for manufacturing MSC-based medicines requires many, many donors who are prepared to donate bone marrow or adipose tissue. Ultimately, the cell therapy is purified from those tissue sources and then injected into the patient. On the other hand, our technology takes a completely different view. We require only one donation of material from one time. That allows the production of a cell called an iPSC, which was the subject of a Nobel Prize in 2012, that then becomes an unlimited starting material for the manufacture of highly consistent and reproducible products. And this is an essential requirement for any cell therapy manufacturer: consistency and reproducibility. So instead of relying on lots and lots of donors who are prepared to donate bone marrow or fat tissue, we only require one single donor, one time, leading to a highly consistent, high quality, and highly efficient cell therapy product. So it's a complete change in the process. This is old school. This is Dark Ages manufacturing. This is 21st century manufacturing, and it represents an evolution in the approach to manufacturing these very exciting medical products. And the issue of manufacturing is very much at the front of the minds of the regulatory agencies, such as the United States FDA, where last year they underscored this problem that's associated with sourcing cell therapy products from multiple donors. They term it substantial functional heterogeneity. Basically, that just means that every donor is different, and therefore every time a batch is manufactured, consistency cannot be guaranteed. I mentioned that Cynata's Gbhd clinical results were published on the front cover of Nature Medicine magazine last year. And the reason that the world was so excited about this is that this condition is otherwise fatal. It occurs in patients who have received a bone marrow transplant. And in our clinical trial that we conducted recently, and then followed up these patients after 2 years, we saw outstanding efficacy of our cells. Indeed, at 2 years, normally all of these patients will ultimately die. But we saw 60% of the patients still alive after 2 years, which compares extremely favorably with patients on other forms of treatment, where only around 17% of the patients are still alive after 2 years. Using the standard of care and using other MSC products around 17 to 40%. Our pipeline is very rich and diverse. We have a phase 3 clinical trial underway in osteoarthritis, as I mentioned before. We are working with our partner Fujifilm to progress the trial and further trials in graft versus host disease. Our COVID program is underway now in phase 2 here in Australia. We have a clinical trial in a condition called critical limb ischemia that's been approved, but we have currently put on hold based on the pandemic restrictions regarding clinical trial recruitment around the world. And we're entering into 3 new clinical targets: diabetic foot ulcers, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, and renal transplantation, which ensures that shareholders have multiple targets and multiple sources of potential revenue. Our deal with Fujifilm, of course, is terribly important to us, and that could result in revenues in excess of 100 million Australian dollars if successful. But we hope to be able to partner some of our other technologies as well as our business development activities progress during the coming months. In addition to these clinical targets, we also have a robust body of preclinical data in a wide variety of other diseases as well, including in heart attack and coronary artery disease, which need no introduction. And we'll progress these targets as finances permit or when we partner them with other companies. Osteoarthritis is a disease that needs no introduction. We all know someone in our family or among our friends who have osteoarthritis, or we may even suffer from it ourselves. And it's important to point out that there is no cure for osteoarthritis. It just gets worse and worse, ultimately requiring more and more analgesics or painkillers, and then eventually joint replacement. Stem cells represent a completely new approach to treating this condition that could potentially result in a recovery of the joint function, or even better still, a significant improvement in the mobility and pain in these patients by diverting the degeneration of the joint to regeneration. And that is what regenerative medicine is all about. It's not just about masking pain or relieving the symptoms. It's about altering the outcome of the disease. And in osteoarthritis, we believe there's a very sound basis for that to occur with our product. And this is a very, very large commercial opportunity, as I mentioned before. The study is funded by the Australian government, and it's in a very large study in 440 patients that will ultimately lead, we hope, to a very satisfactory outcome for this very, very large disease target. The trial is now underway, recruiting patients here in Australia, and we expect results in 2024. If successful, this would completely transform Cynata from a small Australian biotech company to a spectacularly wealthy company. As you know, in biotech, a good clinical result can lead to a huge uplift in share price. We already saw that with the clinical results from our graft versus host disease trial. And of course, if this trial in osteoarthritis, or indeed any of the other studies that we have underway, are successful, then Cynata will catapult in value. We have planning underway now for a clinical trial in diabetic foot ulcers, a condition in which the treatment has unchanged for over 100 years. And as you may well aware, there is a growing epidemic of diabetes in the West as we continue to embrace an unhealthy diet and not enough exercise. So the incidence of diabetes, and therefore diabetic foot ulcers, continues to grow, creating a very exciting market opportunity for us. In idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, we're also planning a clinical trial that's we hope would get underway this year. This is a devastating lung disease that is ultimately fatal and for which there are very few treatments. It causes fibrosis or scar tissue in the lungs, therefore preventing us from being able to breathe. And we, again, like osteoarthritis, we hope that a cell-based approach to this condition will halt the progression of the disease or potentially enable recovery of lung function. Renal transplantation, another very exciting area where we hope that our stem cell-based medicine will be able to reduce the reliance of these patients on immunosuppressive therapy. The unfortunate consequence of requiring a renal transplantation, or indeed any organ transplantation, is that the patient also has to take drugs that will suppress their immune system to allow the graft to function normally. But unfortunately, that is a very, very much a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And it results not only in suppression of the immune reaction against the donor organ, but also reduces the patient's immune system in their defense against cancer. And these patients ultimately have a much higher incidence of development of cancers, and eventually the drugs also poison the donated kidney. So everybody wants to remove that reliance upon immunosuppression, and MSCs may be a treatment in that target disease. So again, another exciting clinical trial that the company plans to get underway in the near future. We see three areas of value generation for our shareholders: the continued development of our portfolio, the generation of good, solid clinical data, and showing that the products work in human clinical targets is the ultimate driver of value. We also have a business strategy that involves partnering our technology, and our deal with Fujifilm, which is revenue bearing, is one such example of that. And we anticipate conducting further deals as the company progresses. And then finally, strategic acquisition or a takeover is always an exit strategy for shareholders as well. And as I mentioned before, the company was the target of several takeover bids back in 2019, and discussions with those parties, although concluded at that time, do continue on a cordial basis as we continue to update them on progress. The market opportunities for our portfolio are very, very large, particularly in osteoarthritis, which, as I mentioned before, has no cure. So a successful outcome in that trial could lead the company being able to access a market in excess of $11 billion US. Even the smaller targets by themselves are worth around $5 to $10 billion as well. So a very rich and commercially attractive portfolio that the company is undertaking. It's very frustrating to see our share price where it is at the moment compared to some of the other companies that operate in the cell therapy space. One example is Fate Therapeutics, a US listed company, the market cap of which is over $8 billion US. And they're just getting their phase 1 clinical trials underway in cancer targets. They use a similar manufacturing strategy to us to make their cell therapy products, and yet they're worth many, many times Cynata's valuation. One of the other companies that many investors will be familiar with is Mesoblast, an Australian company that's also developing MSC-based medicines. Their market cap is over $1.1 billion US. And BlueRock, a US-based cell therapy company that was acquired a year or so ago by Bayer at $1 billion. And yet Cynata is here at $70 million US. So we see enormous valuation upside potential for the company as it continues to reach its goals and drive value catalysts. As we're running out of time, I won't dwell too much on our pipeline. I understand Steph is circulating the presentation, so please do feel free to refer to this, but it outlines the key catalysts that we have coming up in the next 12 months or so. And so it'll be a very exciting time for the company as we continue to update the market with announcements that hopefully will represent value catalysts that will see our share price improve from where it is today. So looking ahead at our key objectives for the company, executing on expanding our clinical pipeline is tremendously important, and that will be the major driver of value in addition to the potential of new deals. We've recently executed on our strategy to accelerate recruitment in the MEN trial. We told the market we were going to do that, and we've now completed that activity. So now that trial is open more broadly, and hopefully we'll completely recruit and report later this year. During the year, we'll have significant recruitment progress in the osteoarthritis trial. We'll optimize our manufacturing capabilities and enhance scale-up efficiencies. We will execute on our US regulatory strategy that will assist us in driving global commercialization. Obviously, activities in the US represent major value drivers as people will quite rightly understand the value of the US market. And as I mentioned before, continued engagement with potential partners will, we hope, lead to further commercial transactions like we've already put in place with Fujifilm of Japan. So in closing, Cynata represents a very compelling investment proposition. We have the leading scalable stem cell therapy technology based around iPSCs worldwide. We have demonstrated clinical utility in our Gbhd clinical trial. In other words, in short, our cells work in a devastating human disease. We've leveraged that data into a broad and attractive pipeline that covers some very, very commercially attractive targets like osteoarthritis, that leads to significant growth potential for the company and for our share price. And given our fundamental strength in our technology, the company is extremely well positioned in the very hot and exciting area of stem cell-based medicines and regenerative medicine. I'll conclude there, Steph, and hand back to you for Q&A.
Thank you, Ross. We have pre-collected some questions. That the first one would be that the cash position is about $30 million, and how long it could support the trials to go in, and if there's any capital raisings is in plan for probably the next 6 months.
Yeah, so as we discussed, there's just under $30 million pro forma on the balance sheet. Based on our current burn of around $700,000 per month, give or take, you can see that that gives us a great runway. Obviously, our spend will start to ramp up as we get our clinical trials underway. And a little bit depends, of course, on the costs that we're currently refining at the moment of those trials. But we believe at this stage, and based on those estimates of those trials, that we have a cash runway out towards the end of 2023. That will allow us to complete some of the value catalysts that we've just discussed. For example, to complete the COVID ARDS trial, and potentially some of the other programs that will get underway very soon as well.
And also, did the COVID-19 impact these trials and any delay in the lab in the past 12 months?
No, they haven't been delayed in the lab. The delay has been the success that has been in restraining the virus spread in Australia. At this time last year, I think all of us in Australia were very anxious about the spread of the pandemic in this country. And as you know, Victoria underwent a severe lockdown for several months, particularly around Melbourne, that ultimately constrained the spread of the virus. But there was a real concern that we would have many more cases than we did last year. So that, unfortunately, by the time we got the trial approved, the spread had been constrained. And so our choices were to either expand the trial recruitment criteria or to take the trial offshore. And of course, in the Northern Hemisphere, particularly the United States and Europe, we've seen huge numbers of cases. But moving a trial is not an easy process. And we were very concerned that by the time we got a trial moved offshore, that the vaccines that were being rolled out would start to see an impact. And so therefore, we'd end up chasing the pandemic around the world. It was a much better outcome for us, we believe, to expand the recruitment criteria of our existing trial here in Australia.
And also a question about, is any like a clear timetable for the trials plans, like what kind of results expected to be released in next probably like 3 or 6 months?
Yes, well, the most likely to read out this year is the COVID ARDS trial. But of course, that entirely depends upon recruitment. And at the moment, you know, the flu season hasn't yet started to really ramp up. Everybody expects it to be a relatively bad flu season in Australia as we start to minimise the social distancing and mask wearing and so on that was evident last year. But the other clinical programs, IPF, DFU, and renal transplantation, we will be informing the market about the costs, timetables, endpoints, and so on of those trials and when to expect results as and when those pieces of information become clear. I don't want to go to market too early with unreliable information because I think that sets unrealistic expectations among investors. I'd much rather ensure that we have robust and reliable information on endpoints and timelines before we make announcements about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, like mentioned in the presentation slides, mentioned that there was about like over 1,200 of the trials initiated. Is there any like competitors or other companies working on the same stem cells, like the stem cells for the same disease or the similar disease portfolio?
Yes, and we see that as a real positive because it substantially reduces the risk to investors. Given that we're following a well-trodden pathway on the clinical use of MSCs, the risk to investors is much lower than if they're pursuing a completely new drug or new process or disease process. We already know from the existing companies that are working in the MSC space that MSCs are very effective in a range of diseases. All we need to do is provide a much more commercializable manufacturing solution, which is where Cynata's technology comes in. So the risk to investors is much lower. There are quite a few other MSC companies around, but they all use the old style manufacturing approach, which, as I mentioned, has been found to be deficient by the FDA. And so our technology, we believe, will address that shortcoming. So we are the only company in the world at the moment that is as advanced as it is in this technology. We're well ahead of anybody else, but obviously there are other companies that are using the old style or conventional approach to manufacturing MSCs.
No, and also the question a lot of people would like to know is any like a target share price in the 6 months or in the year? What would be the target is can increase to?
Well, I think you can. I can't provide a target share price, but investors can certainly go and refer to analyst reports on our website, where they will see that we have guidance reports provided by a number of different brokers, including H.C. Wainwright, one of the leading healthcare investment banks worldwide that have Cynata at a $2 per share price target. So please do refer to the website for that information. It's under the investor section there, and so any interested investor can go and take a look at those analyst reports, which do include price targets.
Sure, we'll let that know. Thank you for your time today and a very comprehensive introduction. And hopefully, the more investors will look at the CYP and can see these potentials. Again, many thanks, and I'll get the Chinese conclusion as well. So. Yeah， 谢谢大家参与今天的活动。那如果有任何问题呢，可以跟我们的客服联系。那我们也可以继续在私下跟 Ross 再进行一些沟通。那么希望大家也多多关注。Thank you, Ross.
Thank you very much, Steph. And certainly I would encourage any of the investors that are on the call to refer to our website at www.cynata.com. And also, you'll find my contact details there, so they should feel free to reach out if there's any particular questions. They're also, I'm sure, welcome to put questions through you if they'd like to, if there's anything that arises subsequent to our presentation today. But I thank the audience very much for their attention, and do hope that they'll take a closer look at Cynata.
Definitely. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Steph. Bye-bye.